What if Anakin Skywalker survived in Return of the Jedi? That's the path I want to explore today. I had a lot of fun writing this, and I'll just say, if you're not a fan of fan service type stuff, you don't really love that kind of thing, this may not be your favorite video, but I had a lot of fun writing this. It was enjoyable, so sit back, relax, let's get into what if Anakin survived in Return of the Jedi. Luke Skywalker did everything he could to drag his father through the Death Star to the shuttle. Everything was collapsing around them, and at the same time, Luke could hear his father's breathing begin to collapse. He was running out of time. Finally, he reached the shuttle and put his father on the ramp. Luke looked at Vader and took his helmet off, so his father could see Luke with his own eyes. Luke looked at Vader, and he told Luke that he was right, and to tell his sister that he was right. And then, he fell back. Luke put his head down, sad for his father's death, but knew it was time to go. And so he prepared to take off. As Anakin, formerly Vader, began to die, voices came to him. First Obi-Wan, then Yoda, then Qui-Gon. They all praised Anakin, saying he did well. He fulfilled the prophecy. Anakin was beginning to transfer into the netherworld of the Force when he saw Obi-Wan. He was a transparent blue spirit, and he came to Anakin, telling him that no, it was not his time yet. Obi-Wan said that someday Anakin would be welcomed here, but today was not his day. And Anakin's eyes shot open. He was back in the back of the shuttle, and suddenly he felt the shuttle shake violently. He sat up, looking out a back window to see the second Death Star explode. Then, he turned back to the front, and Luke was looking at him, a small smile and tears in his eyes. Somehow, Anakin was alive. The Force had given him life, seemingly as a reward for fulfilling the prophecy and finally ridding the galaxy of the darkness. Anakin sat back and laid down. He was alive, but he was very exhausted. Luke flew towards the forest moon of Endor, unsure of exactly what to do. His father was unable to survive much longer without repairs, and the people on Endor would have Anakin killed immediately for his crimes, and Luke could hardly blame them. Anakin got into the co-pilot seat and said they must go to Mustafar. It's where he has resided for years. And Luke looked down to the planet, contacted Leia, and said he had Jedi business to finish, told her to tell the rebels that he said thank you, and Luke blasted into hyperspace with Anakin. The celebration on Endor commenced. Han, Lando, Chewbacca, and the rest of the rebels danced and celebrated the fall of the Empire with the Ewoks. All was good, and Leia joined in soon as well, but she was concerned for Luke. She knew he had gone to fight their father, and now Luke was off somewhere else. Curious, she thought, before joining the celebration. And Luke soon entered the atmosphere for Mustafar, and he could feel the darkness that surrounded this planet. He could feel his father as well, but the darkness in him was all but gone. Anakin had returned. Luke flew to the tall black structure when Anakin began to tell him the history of this planet. Anakin explained the planet is the reason that he must now wear the suit. He fought Obi-Wan here, a duel that would determine the fate of the galaxy, and Anakin explained that he lost. His overconfidence, his arrogance, his need to prove himself was his undoing, and Obi-Wan had left him here to burn, but the Emperor had shown up just in time to rebuild him. And Anakin said this planet was the last place that he ever saw Luke's mother alive. Luke discussed it all now with his father, understanding that he lived here despite the memories would only increase his power in the dark side. So now, Luke must take his father somewhere where the light side can shine. They arrived at the castle, and Anakin told Luke to go enjoy the celebration on Endor. He earned it, and it would be good for the rebellion to celebrate with its hero. Anakin said it would take a while for him in his castle to be back at regular strength. And so Luke did go to the celebration, saying goodbye to his father for now. Anakin smiled as he watched him go, and he slowly but surely got into his bacta tank. The tank had been his escape from the galaxy for years. He used it as a haven to hone his strength in the dark side. But today was different. He was in the light again. He was a Jedi, and in the bacta tank, Anakin allowed happy memories to come to him for a change. Tatooine, winning the pod race, and being held up by Qui-Gon, meeting Padme for the first time, his mother, Oh, how he missed his mother. Then the Jedi Temple, training with Obi-Wan, becoming far more than student and teacher. Becoming brothers. Marrying Padme. More happy memories flew by, and then decades were skipped by, until Anakin saw the faces of Luke and Leia, his children. In time, Anakin would make up for his mistakes. He could not show himself, as he was perhaps the biggest enemy of the galaxy still alive. But he could live to the fullest in other ways. He would dedicate his life to the Force, learn everything he could, and he would teach his children along the way. 5 years later, Luke Skywalker stood in the grass of Ossus next to his rebuilding Jedi Temple. He watched his X-Wing take off, the power behind it rushing him like a big gust of wind, and then it was gone. He had just sent young Grogu off with R2-D2 back to his Mandalorian friend. He had planned to go with the youngling, but Ahsoka had returned right now to talk to Luke about an emerging threat. Once Grogu was gone, Luke found Ahsoka, and they walked together for a long while. Ahsoka detailed everything she'd found out, with the help of people like Hera Syndulla, Sabine Wren, Din Djarin, and others in the New Republic. Grand Admiral Thrawn was making his return, and he looked to take the still-building New Republic by surprise. Ahsoka said New Republic bases were ambushed by people wielding lightsabers, and there were reports from survivors about an army of stormtroopers, but not just any stormtroopers. They were undead, revived by what Ahsoka could only assume to be Night Sister magic. Luke and Ahsoka walked together through a small forest, down a large hill with a hidden stone staircase, and soon found themselves in front of a waterfall. Luke acknowledged the threat and said that he would do more to help from here on out. He'd been so focused on rebuilding the Order, rebuilding this temple, but in order for there ever to be a Jedi Order, the galaxy would need to be safe, free of any remnants of the Empire. Now, Luke held up the waterfall with the Force, and the two of them walked underneath it into a cave to see Anakin. Anakin was meditating at the far side of the cave when he felt the presence of Luke and Ahsoka. He opened his eyes and turned to them, removing his helmet, to be able to truly interact in the best way. In the last 5 years, Anakin had discarded the armor of Darth Vader and used his own expertise in machinery, along with the help of New Republic droids to create a new suit. He never did this as Vader, because the pain and suffering of the old one pushed him further into the dark side. But Anakin's new suit allowed him to move like a human again. He felt like Anakin, only much older and injured beyond ever being fully repaired. His new suit was dark blue and white, based heavily off of a man that Anakin respected for fighting by his side through the Clone Wars. It was perfect for living and learning about the Force. Anakin, at this point, had sworn off fighting, as every time he fought, it only brought darkness upon the galaxy. Instead, as the Chosen One, he had become dedicated to studying the Force and guiding his children and his former Padawan. Only Luke, Ahsoka, and Leia knew of his existence. Luke and Ahsoka would come visit often, though Leia never had. She could not bring herself to visit the man who had helped lead the Empire and stood watch as Alderaan was blown up. Anakin understood, and he loved Leia, though she may never love him. And today he saw Luke and Ahsoka. He remembered the first time Ahsoka had come here. Anakin had called to her in the Force, guiding her away from her years of meditation on Malachor to find him. Their first hug when Ahsoka had seen Anakin was something that he would never forget. And today, Luke came to Anakin, saying that he failed. He failed to keep his student at the temple, and Anakin looked up to the two of them, looked to Ahsoka, then turned to Luke, and said that sometimes for a Jedi to become their best self, they may have to take their own journey for some time. Ahsoka smiled at Anakin, remembering how she walked away from the temple, and how that helped make her into who she is today. Luke acknowledged this idea, and sat down to meditate with Ahsoka and his father. Ahsoka began detailing what she knew of Thrawn, asking Luke and Anakin for their help. Luke said he would help, and Anakin said that he could not fight. He just couldn't, for he was still afraid of who he was during the decades of war. But he knew Thrawn. They had worked together as both Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader. He said that he would guide Luke and Ahsoka when needed, helped them both become stronger in the light side of the Force. Anakin was the best guide for Ahsoka and Luke, and they both understood why he cut himself off from fighting. War had turned him from what Ahsoka described as a charming, friendly, kind man all the way into Darth Vader, the most feared being in the galaxy at the time. And eventually, Luke and Ahsoka left to go aid the New Republic in its fight versus the remnants of the Empire. After they were gone, Obi-Wan Kenobi appeared next to Anakin. His old master said the young Jedi would never truly understand why Anakin was so reserved from fighting, but Obi-Wan said he would understand. And Anakin was thrown into flashbacks of the Clone Wars, choking slaving Zagirians because of his anger overwhelming him, choking Poggle the Lesser as he was blinded by hate, nearly beating Clovis to death to protect his wife, wanting to kill Barriss Offee for what she did to Ahsoka. The fights versus Count Dooku sent a cold shiver down his spine. And at the end of the war, the end of both wars, becoming Vader, but then a memory that overtook it all, Exegol. 2 years after what was thought to be the death of the Emperor, Anakin traveled to Exegol. During the reign of the Empire, Darth Sidious had shown Vader Exegol, where he planned to build a new order and clones of himself to forever remain immortal. And once Anakin had his new suit built, he traveled alone to Exegol. Once there, he found the broken remains of Darth Sidious, along with vats of clones. It was set to be the rebuilding place of the Sith, and once he arrived, Anakin's head was filled with the maniacal laughter of Sidious. He couldn't get it out of his head, it was constant, and Darth Vader was momentarily reawakened. Hearing the laughter of Sidious unleashed Vader, and he used his hatred to storm the area, blowing up vats of clones, destroying everything around him, and finally facing the decaying temporary body of Sidious. The Sith Lord knew this was his official end, and he went out in his own way. As Vader walked up and stabbed him through the heart, Sidious erupted in laughter and said, "You will always be Darth Vader." Upon killing him, it was like a trance was broken. Sidious may never truly be dead, he may always be just floating around through the Force, but he would never inhabit a body again. All of his clones were gone. And Anakin looked around now to see the destruction. Sidious was always in control, but he was dead. For good this time, Anakin had to hope. And he came back to the present, and the words, "You will always be Darth Vader," still rang in his head. Only he and the Force spirits ever knew of this trip, and it was why he could not fight. The fight brought Vader to the surface, and Anakin needed him to stay dead. Over the next couple of years now, the New Republic slowly shifted from being wary of a war to quickly falling behind Thrawn as he attempted to retake the galaxy for the Empire. The Imperial remnants had formed a Shadow Council, but at the start it was largely ineffective as, predictably, there were far too many people vying for power. After some time, Moff Gideon had appeared to be the leader, but his death by the hands of the Mandalorians had created an opening. And when Thrawn made his return, the Council was more than willing to stand behind him. And so they did. The New Republic was slow to act, as they were more focused on actually restoring a democracy before engaging in another war. Luckily, Luke Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano, guided by Anakin, were able to recruit enough people to fight by their side. Hera Syndulla and the Ghost Crew, reinvigorated by finding Ezra Bridger, joined the fight along with Admiral Akbar and his supporters. And after the couple of years, the New Republic began to understand the threat, and they were ready for war. Thrawn was far superior to anyone that the New Republic had engaged with in the 7 or so years since the fall of the Empire. No matter what the New Republic did, Thrawn wasn't just 1 step ahead, he was 10 steps ahead. Thrawn had spent the last couple years perfectly planning out this galactic assault that was now to be launched. With the help of the Shadow Council, along with the Night Sisters creating thousands of soldiers for an undead army, the New Republic would be unable to stand in his way. He'd sent out Star Destroyers as distractions to crucial food production planets and other crucial New Republic systems, all for one thing: the destruction of Coruscant. Once the New Republic was spread thin, his assault on Coruscant would bring the galaxy to its knees as the Empire revealed itself to be reborn on Ilum. The New Republic was spread across the galaxy, fighting off the real threat of the heir to the Empire. Luke, Ahsoka, Han, Lando, Chewbacca, and many other Republic leaders were fighting off battles above the planets of Ando, Filvi, Ilum, Kroned, and others. They all received a transmission from Leia. Return to Coruscant immediately. Thrawn has revealed his grand plan. On Coruscant, an hour before hearing the transmission, Leia sat in the New Republic government building. Luke and Ahsoka had helped her to begin learning the Force, and she planned to learn when this war was over, planned to continue learning, training further in the Force. But what she had learned proved useful today. As she sat with Mon Mothma and other government leaders, she felt a great disturbance. Something was coming. Something huge. Without considering what it could truly mean, Leia remembered what Ahsoka had taught her. Trust your instincts. And that is what she did today. Upon feeling the disturbance, she interrupted the meeting and ordered a full evacuation. Then, she immediately sent the transmission to call everyone back to Coruscant, as Grand Admiral Thrawn was revealing his plan. Mon Mothma asked why, and Leia just begged her to trust her, and so she did. But many did not. The evacuation was slow and stubborn, until eventually the entire ground began to shake, like a violent earthquake. With everyone scrambling, Leia got to the highest point of their building and looked around Coruscant. Buildings were crumbling from the earthquake, citizens were running around in fear, and Leia was struck by fear as she looked to the industrial sector of Coruscant. The ground was caving in, and from it, the largest Star Destroyer she'd ever seen was slowly emerging. This was a dreadnought, one that had been hidden away underneath everything for long, and Leia feared the worst. Grand Admiral Thrawn stood at the front of the super dreadnought as it rose from the ground. Years ago, he and the Emperor had devised secret plans for construction of this super weapon. It had taken over 10 years to complete, and Thrawn had kept it in a secret until a few days ago, recruiting a crew to board the dreadnought with him at the helm. And in time, it would be safely above Coruscant, and the super weapon would be charged. The New Republic would die today, before it could ever truly be born. Thrawn had anticipated every possible outcome, and he would have ultimate victory today. He let himself smile, as 10 Star Destroyers were on their way to Coruscant to fight off anyone who should dare try and stop him. Leia watched in horror as everything she and the New Republic was trying to build seemed to be at a swift end. Everyone was spread out across the galaxy, but luckily her feeling in the Force had given them a heads up and could get a lot of fighters back in time. There was such a small chance of victory with this dreadnought rising to space, and she thought of everything. Finally, it clicked. Perhaps there was someone who could help. Someone she could never bring herself to see. Her father. Leia scrambled to the hangar to find her ship, telling the government leaders she would be back soon without any other information. There was no time. And as Leia reached space, she saw the New Republic cruisers emerge, along with Luke and Ahsoka. Their fleet had made it back in time. This was what she needed, and the Jedi had to stay and fight, while Leia went on this mission, alone. Blasting into hyperspace, Leia took off for Ossus. Luke, Ahsoka, and the rest of their crew prepared for a fight. Imperial Star Destroyers appeared from hyperspace, protecting any path to the rising dreadnought. And soon, an all-out battle above Coruscant began. New Republic versus the heir to the Empire, a battle for the fate of the galaxy. On Ossus, Leia landed and felt into the Force for her father. She ran through the area, up hills, through water, getting closer to seeing Anakin Skywalker. And in the cave, Anakin could feel her arrival. He was nervous, but Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Qui-Gon stood with him now, saying that he must hear what Leia has to say, what his daughter has to say, that Anakin has gone into the light, that he was good, that his darkness was put behind him. And as Anakin saw the spirits fade away, he saw someone emerge from the waterfall. For the first time, Anakin laid his own 2 eyes on his daughter, and he was immediately overwhelmed. He saw Leia, but inside of her he felt Padme, saw Padme, her determination, her kindness, her bravery, her stubbornness. This was Padme's daughter. And Leia saw a man encased by a suit of armor. Not the intimidating black armor from the Tantive 4, but new blue and white armor, and as she approached, she could feel the kindness in Anakin, but beneath it all, a deep sadness that would always be there. For a while, nothing was said. Both father and daughter were taking in the moment. Leia understood that this man aided in the destruction of Alderaan, but he seemed to be changed, and he could make up for some of it by helping today. If the legends of Anakin were true, he could face the Empire alone and have a chance. So after a while, Leia asked her father to help, to fight the Empire, to help his son, his daughter, his Padawan, to help the trillions of innocents on Coruscant. Anakin was afraid of the fight. How could he not be? But in the end, Anakin Skywalker is the fight. No matter how hard he tried, he would always go back to it. Deep down, he always knew this day would come. He'd spent years learning the Force, embracing the light side, speaking with the greatest Jedi, and he was stronger than he could ever have imagined. All of it was leading up to this one final battle as Anakin Skywalker. Thrawn watched the battle from the dreadnought as it finally completed its rise to the atmosphere. Soon, the super cannons would be ready. Coruscant would burn. The Empire would rise again. Luke and Ahsoka were called back to the fleet as a temporary retreat was called. They were waiting on more reinforcements, but many New Republic leaders were stuck in other battles across the galaxy. They were losing, and losing fast. They needed reinforcements. And through their intercoms, a new voice spoke to every New Republic fighter above Coruscant. It was an older voice, but one that rang of sudden enthusiasm, and all that was said was, "This is where the fun begins." Anakin Skywalker flew his Jedi starfighter, personally modified and fixed up to exactly what he needed, through the Republic cruisers, flying through them all to emerge to the front, right in the middle of Ahsoka and Luke. The voice rang through the New Republic comms, and almost no one recognized it, but one person knew it like his own voice. Captain Rex was commanding a New Republic cruiser, and upon hearing that voice, was thrown back to the Clone Wars. It wasn't Anakin's voice exactly, but it was him. Rex knew it. It was deeper and damaged, but the tone, Rex would recognize it anywhere. He remembered watching Anakin Skywalker do things that no other being in the galaxy could even dream of, and with the New Republic reeling, he looked out the window to see a yellow and black Jedi starfighter emerge. Rex turned to the men on the ship and told them to prepare for battle. The tide has turned in their favor. And now, lining up next to Luke, there was one other person, or droid, that was happy to see Anakin. Whirling beeps like never before, R2 asked Luke if he could join Anakin's ship. Luke laughed at the droid and said, of course. So R2 ejected and floated over to the droid slot on Anakin's ship. "Just like old times, little buddy," Anakin said, and with that, he took off, telling Luke and Ahsoka they would know when to push the attack forward. Thrawn looked on through the front of the dreadnought. His crew paid little attention to the incoming ship, but after some memory searching, Thrawn knew that everyone was in danger. Studying the colors of the ship and its flight pattern, he knew who this was. Darth Vader. Anakin Skywalker. Thrawn had studied the fighting style of Anakin years ago, the flying style as well, and now he was watching him, and it was even better than he'd imagined, even better than the record said. Thrawn had imagined every outcome, but the return of the greatest Jedi pilot was something that was far from any expectations. Thrawn ordered all fire to focus on the single starship approaching, immediately. And so, they did. But yet Thrawn said to himself, "I have a bad feeling about this." This is Anakin Skywalker, the most powerful Jedi of this generation, perhaps any generation, the fastest, the strongest, an unstoppable warrior. On the ground, or especially in space, there is no one even close. He has not just power, not just skill, but that rare combination of boldness and grace. He is the best there is at what he does, the best there has ever been, and he knows it. He has been through it all, and he has now learned to master the fear that once controlled him. When Anakin last flew above Coruscant in a battle, a dragon had been eating away at him, fear chewing away at his heart. But now, he controlled the fear. He put the fear into his opponents, and today, would be his most proud day. The Force flows through him, his eyes determined, set on the task at hand, to pierce through the layers of defenses, to reach the heart of the dreadnought, and to extinguish the threat. The starfighter's controls respond to his touch with grace and familiarity, a testament to the years he's spent as a skilled pilot, pod racing, fighting in wars, and now this. Anakin flew forward, Luke showing up now on his left, and Ahsoka on his right, a trio facing the Empire head-on. Before him, Imperial-class Star Destroyers, loyal to the memory of an empire long gone. Their turbo lasers flickered to light, sending green blasts of energy toward Anakin's starfighter. He maneuvered with a grace, weaving around the onslaught of firepower, each evasive maneuver, perfect precision, each calculated roll, executed to get to his destination. Luke and Ahsoka flew off to distract them, giving Anakin even more room to operate. Anakin's battle senses are alive and well, feeling the familiar rush of the Force guiding him, allowing him to predict the attacks before they even come, as if he and his starfighter are extensions of each other. He can feel Obi-Wan, Yoda, Qui-Gon with him. He can feel other Jedi with him now, Mace Windu, Kit Fisto, Plo Koon, the Jedi Order relying on him. A tap on his console triggers a countermeasure that obscures his ship from enemy sensors and any deflections. The enemy's firepower is relentless, but every shot misses him. As the Jedi starfighter flies through the chaos, the dreadnought looms even larger, and with a burst of speed, Anakin charges toward the dreadnought's top turrets. It was expected that he would go below for the main cannons, but he had a plan for those. Anakin flew around the gargantuan vessel's turrets, his starfighter threading the needle through narrow gaps between the ship. Turret bolts scorched the space around him, but he flew around each one of them, taking out every last turret. And at the front of the battle, the rising Empire had been so focused on this single fighter that they didn't notice the New Republic's reinforcements. Rex looked on as Anakin did his thing, then sent a comm to all reinforcements. Commence attack. Save Coruscant. Luke Skywalker flew through waves of TIE fighters, Ahsoka next to him. They were going for the dreadnought to help Anakin, and behind them, friendly blaster bolts began to fly. Leia, Akbar, and Rex commanding the three main cruisers as they pushed forward. A squadron of TIE fighters were quickly overwhelmed, as the ship known as the Ghost flew side by side with an N-1 Naboo starfighter, both ships leading their own squadrons of X-Wings. And from the side, the Millennium Falcon arrived, coming into view, taking out its own squad of Imperial fighters, before Han greeted them with a typical sarcastic introduction. And Thrawn looked on as his final turret aboard the dreadnought was destroyed. Luckily, the super cannons were near ready to fire. He turned to give the instruction to fire on Coruscant, when something distracted him. He turned back to look out to space, and Anakin Skywalker was headed right for him. Anakin spoke to R2, telling him to fly the starship into the hangar. He would meet him there soon, and with that, Anakin ejected, using the Force to propel him right for the command room of the dreadnought. His armor allowed for some survival in space, and Anakin ignited his blue lightsaber, crashing through the window. Thrawn had always been impressed with Anakin. They'd been allies more than once, but today, as Thrawn felt the lightsaber pierce his chest, all he could think about was how perfectly Anakin had flown, and how perfectly Anakin was kept hidden. How artistically done, Thrawn said as he died, and he and the rest of the crew were pulled out into the vacuum of space. Soon enough, the emergency hatch closed, but the crew was gone. Anakin looked outside from the Imperial ship. How many battles had he looked on from the side of the Empire, he wondered. Anakin moved to take control of the super cannons when the doors in front of him opened. Running in to see the destruction were three people wielding red lightsabers. A man Anakin recognized as former Jedi Baylan Skoll, his apprentice Shin Hati, and an unknown Inquisitor. But moments later, Luke Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano entered the room, lining up beside Anakin, father and son, master and apprentice. For the first time, all three of them in a lightsaber duel together. Anakin nodded to them, and the battle began. The air was electric with tension as the clash of lightsabers sounded through the ship. Anakin Skywalker, his blue blade in hand, moved with skill built from experience and training. Beside him, his son Luke Skywalker wielded a green lightsaber, his movements mirroring Anakin's. Flanking them was Ahsoka Tano, her twin lightsabers a blur of motion, and the clash of lightsabers was intense, the room illuminated by the vibrant hues of the blades as they continued to collide. Anakin's attacks were powerful and precise, his strikes carrying the weight of his emotions as he fought to protect those he cared about. He could feel the darkness, but he kept it at bay. He was the master. Luke's style was a blend of his father's teachings and his own intuition, and Ahsoka used her acrobatics and swift strikes to take down the group's assault. Balin's brute strength was matched by Anakin's determination, their blades meeting in a shower of sparks, each one pushing against the other in a display of power. Meanwhile, Shin engaged Luke in their own duel, their lightsabers weaving in clashes of calculated lunges. Ahsoka found herself locked in a duel of agility with the Inquisitor, their blades matching blow for blow. As the battle raged on, the combatants' breaths were heavy, sweat glistening on their brows as they pressed on. The three Jedi held their ground, the teamwork and synergy evident in every move. They anticipated each other's actions, covering for one another, exploiting openings in their opponents. And in the end, the unity of the Jedi tipped the scales. Anakin, Luke, and Ahsoka managed to overpower their adversaries. Anakin pulled his signature spin, blocking a strike from Balin and cutting his hands off, pushing him into the wall, knocked unconscious. Anakin then spun to Shin, pushing her back a step and giving an opening for Luke to slash across her legs, dropping her to the ground. And Ahsoka knocked the Inquisitor's lightsabers from his hands, then spun backwards, stabbing both white sabers through his chest. Victory assured, Anakin told the other two to get out of here. He had a plan. And so they did, escaping as Anakin faced both super cannons at each other. Once they were ready, he called R2 back to his position, and Anakin fired both super cannons, creating a huge explosion that began to make its way up the ship. The explosion was making its way to the top of the dreadnought, but Anakin had one more idea. Pushing on the forward accelerator, he guided the dreadnought to the other Star Destroyers. In a final moment, Anakin jumped out to R2, but the explosion hit him hard. He was blown back at the ship, armor greatly damaged. R2 caught him, and Anakin had R2 guide them back as he fainted. The dreadnought explosion carried through the entire ship, and Anakin had guided it just enough to crash into another Star Destroyer. A chain reaction began. The dreadnought exploded with one Star Destroyer, giving the New Republic time to overrun and destroy them all, before retreating away from the exceeding explosions. The New Republic was saved. The battle was won, and any remnants would have to hide away for good this time. Anakin was going in and out of consciousness as he was flown to a Coruscant medical bay. The last thing he saw before entering the bay was a New Republic billboard with a picture of his ship and the caption, "The hero with no fear saves the day." Now in the medical bay, he awoke but felt completely ruined. Next to him, Ahsoka informed Anakin that the explosion had reinvigorated all of the injuries from Mustafar, and they were irreparable this time. Anakin looked around. He saw Luke, Leia, Ahsoka, and Rex smiling at him. R2-D2 and C-3PO on their side. And then he looked once more and saw Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan told him that now it was time. Anakin thanked everyone for saving him. Then, Anakin was dead, joining the Jedi in the netherworld of the Force. Years later, Leia and Han would visit Naboo with their son Ben. They would take him to the grave of his grandfather, Anakin Skywalker, the grave next to his wife, Padme Amidala, the grave that read as such: Anakin Skywalker, father, husband, and hero. And folks, that's where our story ends today. Oh my goodness, a long one, and one that I'm like out of breath. Jeez. Hope the mic sounds good. We've been getting a lot of mic comments, so I hope it sounds better. Also, what'd you think? Extremely fan servicey? Yeah, maybe. But was it fun? Yeah, it was. Did some things maybe go weird with timelines? Yeah, sure. Should I have explored Thrawn more? Yeah, maybe. But either way, I really enjoyed making this. Giving Anakin, Luke, Leia, Ahsoka each their own shining moments. I thought it was really cool. So, I do hope you enjoyed. Yeah, Ahsoka's 9 days away? So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.